Namaskarams. What you are going to listen today is an English translation of my speech during Satsang 2, the second Satsang of the Om Satsangatyam group. The topic chosen for the day was Brahma Gyan. First, let us see what is Brahma Gyan. Brahma Gyan is the knowledge of Brahma. Whenever we hear the word Brahma, the first thing that crosses our mind is this picture. The depiction of Lord Brahma we see in the movies and books and all these things. Brahma doesn't appear like this. This is a more accurate depiction of Brahma, Lord Brahma. But anyhow, the Brahma we are going to discuss today is not about Lord Brahma, but Brahman, the Parabrahman. The Parabrahman, that which is described as a single entity, the singular existence, that which manifests as everything of the creation, the creator, the created, and the creation. That Parabrahman, which is proclaimed by the Vedas as the singular entity. The Upanishads, that are the summary of the Vedas, reiterate the fact that Parabrahman is the one and only existence, and whatever we see, we hear, we feel, including we, are all manifestations of Parabrahman. Bhagavad Gita, which again is a summary of the Upanishads, reiterates the same fact and proclaims that Parabrahman is the one that is to be known, knowing which there remains nothing to be known. This Parabrahman is described in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad in detail during the conversation between sage Yajnavalkya and Gargi in the court of Janaka. Yajnavalkya answers the questions of Gargi and says Parabrahman is the one which manifests as the living, non-living, all entities, including the celestial bodies, the creation, everything. Not only the celestial bodies and the living and non-living entities, but all the emotions, the happenings between them, happenings involving them, everything is Parabrahman only and nothing but Parabrahman. Now when we speak about Vedas, Upanishads and all these high sounding words, we get an impression that Parabrahman or Brahma Gyan is a very complicated thing. But is Brahma Gyan really complicated? For the one who doesn't know the way in, the way through and the way out, anything is complicated. But for the one who knows the way in, way through and way out in every minute detail, anything is easy, simple. So whether something is complicated or easy doesn't depend on that thing, but depends on the knowing and the not knowing of that thing. So if we want to know whether Brahma Gyan is simple or complicated, we have to see and learn it from learned sages who are Brahma Gyanis themselves, like Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and Mahavatar Babaji. While studying their lifetimes, we can see that in conversations with their disciples who are also seekers of Brahma Gyan, when they were asked the question that after attaining Brahma Gyan, what was your first impression? The sages reply that after attaining Brahma Gyan, after knowing what is Brahma, they got an impression that, oh, this is Brahman, this is so simple, this has been there in front of my eyes all the time. Why did I spend so many years in penance knowing about Parabrahman? Why did I spend so many lifetimes in ignorance keeping the truth in plain sight? So Parabrahman or Brahma Gyan is neither complicated nor easy. It is in the knowing or the not knowing it becomes complicated or easy. Based upon from whom we learn about Brahma Gyan, if we hear it from an ordinary speaker, what he will say is Brahma Gyan is so complicated, Brahma Gyan is so difficult to attain, it takes so many years of penance, so many lifetimes of practice and all and all. So the listener immediately gets confused and thinks Brahma Gyan is something that is not within his purview or his ability to achieve, and leaves the Brahma Gyan then and there itself and makes no effort to proceed further. If we learn about Brahma Gyan from a learned speaker, he is the one who has read so many books on Brahma Gyan, read so many teachings on Brahma Gyan, heard from so many people about Brahma Gyan. So he gives us an opinion that Brahma Gyan is this, Brahma Gyan is that says told like this one told like this, it was written like this and all those things. So the listener gets confused and gets an impression that Brahma Gyan is something that is described by like so many things by so many people, and maybe some make an effort but not wholeheartedly. Another kind of speaker is a learned aspiring seeker. This aspiring seeker is a disciple of a realized soul. So, though he is not a Brahmagyani himself, he learnt about Brahmagyan directly from a Brahmagyani. So, his words have a clarity that the previous two speakers do not have. Anyone who listens from such a aspiring seeker understands Brahmagyan with a clarity and understands it enough so as to make a sincere effort from himself. But the best one to listen about Brahmagyan from is a realized speaker who is a Brahmagyani himself. So when this Brahmagyani speaks about Brahmagyan, it is 100% clarity, perfect understanding to all those who listen about Brahmagyan. In fact, sometimes this Brahmagyani need not even speak. There need not be a verbal communication. This is known as Maunavyakya. We can see this in the lifetimes of great Brahmagyanis like Sri Ramakrishna Paramhamsa, Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi, Jagadguru Adi Shankaracharya, Chandrasekharendra Saraswati Mahaswami, and all those. We hear experiences of so many disciples just sitting in front of them, all their doubts get clarified and they become extremely knowledgeable of Brahmagyan. We hear so many stories described in the books of Vedanta that Jagadguru Adi Shankaracharya once granted Brahmagyan to one of his disciples who was not even in his sight. He was somewhere away from him, and he granted all his Gyan to that disciple. That disciple, an academically poor student, suddenly transforms into a Brahmagyani Totakacharya. Similar things happened with Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi. So many disciples used to come to him to explain regarding Dakshinamurti Stotra and such other complicated works of Jagadguru Adi Shankaracharya. Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi asks them to come one day while he was in deep meditation. They sit before him for some time and all their doubts get quenched in the extraordinary brilliance radiating from Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi. That doesn't need a voice, that doesn't need a verbal communication. The knowledge gets transplanted from his mind to the mind of the seekers, eligible seekers. So what is it like when such a Brahmagyani speaks? We'll take an example of Bhagavan Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Once, one of his disciples asked Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, Guruji, we are all trying regarding Brahmagyan, but how do we know that we have attained Brahmagyan? This is a very important question, because whenever we are going on a journey, we have to first decide what the final destination is. We have to know a landmark or some thing to know that we have arrived at our destination. So he asks this. Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa replies with a simple analogy. When I heard this analogy for the first time, I was very surprised. How can Sri Ramakrishna make such a comparison? How can he make it so simple? What Ramakrishna Paramahamsa said was, take an example of a mother who is putting her child to sleep. The child asks his mother, Mother, wake me up when I have to go for toilet. Then the mother says, Child, when you have to go to toilet, you will get woken up yourself. I need not wake you up. So Bhagavan Ramakrishna says, when you attain Brahmagyan, you will realize you have attained Brahmagyan. You need not need any landmarks. You need not need any guidance once you have reached the destination, Brahmagyan. Oh, how simply he has described about Brahmagyan. What a simple and basic analogy. That is how Brahmagyanis speak. That is how the most complicated appearing thing becomes so much simple, so much easy. But here you are listening Brahmagyan from me. I cannot simplify it as simply as Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. So you need to focus a bit. Now you can get a doubt. If you can't simplify it as Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, why eat our brain? Why trouble us with all your detailed explanations? Yes, this question needs to be answered first before I actually plunge into the topic. Because Brahmagyan is not a topic which I chose, but it is a topic which chose me. I will elaborate what exactly happened. how I decided to speak on Brahmagyan, how Brahmagyan decided to manifest through me. It has been a habit since many years to listen Srimad Bhagavad Gita. This Bhagavad Gita is a rendition in Telugu by Sri Gangadhar Shastri Garu. It is a rendition of all the 700 slokas of Bhagavad Gita along with meanings in Telugu. This is the first such rendition in a musical format of Bhagavad Gita in any language in the world. So this Sampurna Bhagavad Gita Parayana I have been listening like many hundreds of times over and over since many years. But from childhood I had a habit to listen to the Bhagavad Gita rendition by Sri Ghantasala Venkateswara Rao Garu. He is a famous Telugu singer and he sang Bhagavad Gita selected poems, around 100 odd poems of Bhagavad Gita with Telugu meaning. What Gangadhar Shastri Garu did was completing the project that Ghantasala Garu initiated. So I had a habit to listen Ghantasala Bhagavad Gita as a child. So I thought I have been listening to this Bhagavad Gita by Gangadhar Shastri Garu since many years. So let me listen to Ghantasala Bhagavad Gita once again. So I listened to the Bhagavad Gita, the whole rendition, but my mind got stuck at this particular poem. Mahashaya Saptapurve Chatvaro Manavastadha Madbhava Manasa Jata Esham Loka Imah Prajaha. It means all the sages, the Saptarshis, the 4 sages, Sanaka, Sanandana, Sanat Kumara, Sanatsatu, the 14 Manus. Manus are the first rulers of the creation. All are born out of my mind and its thought process. And from there, from that initial creation, came out the creation, all the worlds and their inhabitants. This is what Sri Krishna says to Arjuna in chapter 10, shloka 6 of Bhagavad Gita. After hearing the whole of Bhagavad Gita, this particular shloka played again and again in my mind, over and over, again and again. I didn't know why my mind was stuck at this poem, but as it has been a habit to me, anything that happens, whatever happens, is divine plan and I don't interfere in that plan actively or passively. So I thought, let it be, let it play as long as it wants to play. So it went on for 2 or 3 days, day and night actually, in sleep, in dreams, in wake up. I was doing surgery, I was attending to patients, I was doing everything, but in the background of my mind, this shloka is continuing to play. So after 2 to 3 days of such continuous memorization of this shloka or continuous rendition of this shloka in my mind, that night I was going to sleep and I was not able to sleep. That's a rarity because I usually sleep in the first few seconds of thinking of sleep. So I thought I am not getting deep sleep. Then in that state of neither awake nor sleeping, I suddenly came fully awake because of sudden bout of cough and cold. That bout of cough and cold was actually to make me fully awake of my surroundings. In that fully awake state, I suddenly lost all consciousness. I lost consciousness of the surrounding, I lost consciousness of myself, I lost consciousness of date and time. What remained was a brilliance unparalleled, was bliss undescribable. In that bliss, engulfed by that brilliance, I stayed for quite some time. And as I was coming out of it, the whole Brahmagyan manifested to me. How to speak about Brahmagyan, what to describe about Brahmagyan, how to explain Brahmagyan, what are the analogies to be given about Brahmagyan, everything manifested to me as a torrential pour of knowledge. That knowledge which I am going to share with you now. So Brahmagyan chose me to manifest itself and I didn't choose Brahmagyan. So let us come into the topic now. Let us start with an analogy. Whenever I see a movie on television or a program on television, it's my habit to think back. Now I am sitting in my hall watching the movie in solitude in my room in full comfort. So what happened in the background to make this possible? That is this. Someone might have got an idea to make a movie, someone who might have written a story, someone might have acted in it, the technical team, the camera team, whatever the audio dubbing, whatever process that goes behind the screens, and the full movie is made. The movie is purchased by someone, financed by someone else. The movie is released in the theaters. Now it comes into the television, the marketing team, and someone might have invented the television first, the remote control, the ways how a movie can be broadcasted into a television, and all these things. So it involves so many people that finally we watch the movie in our home, in the comforts, in the confines of our bedroom. If we trace back this journey from where this movie started, it started in the mind of one individual. One individual's mind, the idea started, it multiplied, it manifested through many people, and finally came as the end product that we are able to see in the TV. Similarly, this creation manifested from the single thought process, from the singular mind of the Parabrahman, singular mind of the only existence. We call him God, we call him Vishnu, we call him Ishwar, we call him Ram, whatever name we call him, the nameless, formless, eternal Parabrahman, in its mind, in his emotions, started the seed of the creation, and from that creation manifested everything of this creation. We are seeing that. That is what Krishna meant when he said, it is from my mind, from the emotions, from the thought process of my mind came all these. It is from him everything manifested. That is the beginning, the starting point. How do we go back to the source then? How do we identify that it all came from there, from that singular point? Let us get back to another analogy. Recently, I bought a new car. So I was looking at some videos, car manufacturing videos and all. They are now available at YouTube. Previously, I have seen a few of the videos the last time I bought a car. But this time, many more videos were available, and the process was process can be clearly known in different detailed videos. So the videos are like this. There are big robotic machines that assemble so many metallic parts into a shape, and then the plastic parts, the fiber, the glass, everything, and the final end product is in front of our eyes, comes out of the factory. So the process starts like this. A lump of metal is taken, it's made into different shapes, holes are cut, many such pieces are bought to form a machine, the motor, the car is formed. Like this, every part takes shape and this. So let us trace back the steps from the car to the engine to the metallic lump and all these things. Finally, it comes to metal lump, glass lump, plastic lump, and all these lumps. So let us go back further. Where do these lumps come from? These lumps come from excavations in earth. So they all come from earth. Mother Earth is the beginning of all these vehicles. So initially it was thought Mother Earth gives us food. Then actually as civilization processed, Mother Earth gave us cotton, gave us clothes to dress, houses to build, and everything. So whatever we are wearing, whatever we are living in, whatever we are driving, whatever we are utilizing, everything came from Mother Earth. So where did we come from? What all we are seeing, what all you are using, what all we are utilizing, what all we are observing, everything comes from Mother Earth. So where did we come from? We too came from Mother Earth, obviously. Because whatever we eat becomes we. It is like this. Whatever we eat, the carbohydrates, proteins, minerals, fat, everything gets absorbed, amalgamated into the cells, and it becomes the tissues, the organs, the entire human being. Our body, every single cell is replenished over and over, again and again, in a process that may vary from days to weeks to years. The skin regenerates very fastly, the muscle takes little more time, the bone takes very long time, and the nerves regenerate very last. But anyhow, the whole body regenerates itself, replenishes itself. This regeneration process is any but flawed, and that's the reason for aging. But whatever food we intake becomes us. Not only the physical or material aspect of the food, but the mental aspect of the food, the spiritual aspect of the food, how the food was cooked, and what were the thoughts in the process of the person who was cooking the food also come and manifest into the eater's mind. So that's a different topic. I am not going into detail into that, but it is concluded that we came from Mother Earth. Then where did Earth come from? Let us go back and back to trace our origins back to the source, back to the Parabrahman from which we have arrived. So this Mother Earth came from Sun, Pratyaksha Parameshwara, Sun. So if we are sprouts of the earth and earth is a sprout of the sun, has come from the sun. In childhood, whenever I heard sun is Pratyaksha Parameshwara, I had a doubt. How can sun be Pratyaksha Parameshwara? How can sun be so vital? Sun gives us light. If there is no sun, we can sustain in lights. We can switch on the lights, we can switch on our tube lights, our focus lights, our bright lamps, and we can survive and sustain. So how is sun Pratyaksha Parameshwara? So sun is not just the source of light, it is the source of life too. It is that which sustains life. It is that which created life, because sun gave birth to earth and earth gave birth to us. So all the planets around the sun are but small rock bits that flew out of the sun. So sun is the Pratyaksha Parameshwara, the one which has given us origin. All this is scientifically validated facts. Whatever I have spoken till now is scientifically validated. This is science. Science has reached so far. We will go further beyond. Don't worry. In coming millennia or decades or millennia, whatever time, centuries or whatever time, science will also follow suit. But do you want to wait till then? Obviously no. So we will go further into further reaches where science hasn't reached yet. We think science has advanced so much that there is nothing science cannot reach. But in fact, the part of spirituality understood by human intellect is called science. Spirituality is an ocean and science is too small. I always feel in the ocean of spirituality, science is but a small spoonful. How can you measure an ocean in terms of spoonfuls? How many spoonfuls make an ocean? Can anyone answer that? It is impossible. It is impossible to calculate. Science can never reach the ends of spirituality, at least now. So, we'll go beyond science in this analogy. At one time I saw in magazines some pictures of ice sculptures. An ice city or an ice township, something kind of that was built in the colder regions of the Arctic, I think, Arctic or Europe or some place. So there it is complete snowfall. Temperature reaches minus degrees and it is uninhabitable. But there the ice structures were built. In these ice structures there were ice figurines, ice chairs, ice tables, ice glasses, ice beds. Everything was ice. Chandeliers were ice, lights were ice, everything were ice. There is nothing that which is not ice. Ice manifested as different forms. As everything is ice. Here when we are observing the ice figurines, the ice sculptures, it is very clear that it is ice that manifested, the ice which has been made up into so many different forms. Because the transformation is not very complicated. The ice is visible all around the place, and there in front of your eyes, the ice took into various shapes. But with Brahman, the sun, the earth, the creation, the transformation is much more deep. Parabrahman manifested into singular elements, that singular elements cloaked upon itself so many layers and layers and becomes manifested as the creation and we the humans. The transformation is very complicated and over many millions and billions of years. So it is not so easy that we learn in the ice sculptures that all the sculptures are made of ice. But if we trace back the steps, step by step, we will reach the singular source that is the starting point of all this, the Parabrahman. So from that singular entity, the Parabrahman manifested the creation. But there is a flaw here. If the creation has manifested as a separate entity from that Parabrahman, the Parabrahman is different and the creation is different. It manifested, it came out of the Parabrahman. Then, if that is the case, the following Upanishad Vakya does not hold good. What is the Upanishad Vakya? It states, Purnamadaha, Purnamidam, Purnat Purnamudachyate, Purnasya Purnamadaya, Purnameva Vasishyate. It means that is complete, this is complete, from that complete came this complete. Even after the division or subtraction of this complete from that complete, the completeness of that complete remains complete. Don't get confused with so many completes, it's not that confusing actually. So that refers to the singular existence, the singular entity, the all in all, the Parabrahman. This refers to the individual entity, to us, to the elements of creation, to the aspects of creation, whatever. So this complete has come from that complete. Point number one is a complete cannot come from another complete because it has come from something else. It cannot be complete itself. Point number two, if this has come out from something, that something will become deficient. Even if a drop comes out of the ocean, that ocean is deficient of the drop, come what may. However big the ocean is, however small the deficiency is, it will become deficient. But here, the one that which originated from is not at all deficient. The completeness of that remains complete. It remains unperturbed, undisturbed, unchanged. So how is it possible if it has come out of the Parabrahman? It actually didn't come out of the Parabrahman. The universe, the creation came into the Parabrahman, from Parabrahman into Parabrahman. So there exists nothing other than Parabrahman. What all exists is Parabrahman, what all exists is Brahman. From that Brahman came the creation into the Brahman. So the creation, the sustenance and the destruction happens within Brahman. The creation is in Brahman, the creation itself is Brahman. So how is this possible? How can it happen within itself? So let us take an analogy further. When you sleep, when you get a dream, in that dream you may notice so many towns, so many cities, so many constructions, so many other people, some people whom you know in real life, some people whom you don't know, different characters, maybe something that which you never or can ever see in the real world, you see in the dream world. When you are in the dream, if someone comes to you and says within the dream itself that wake up my child, this is just a dream, this is not reality, you will say, how can you say that it is not reality? How can you say this is an illusion? I am seeing you, I am touching you, I am experiencing pleasure, I am experiencing pain, I am seeing all this surroundings, what all is seen, I am hearing, I am feeling everything. How can you say it's a dream? We will argue endlessly. But when we ourselves wake up out of the dream, we will say, oh my God, how did I argue so much in the dream? I argued so much, so foolish am I. It's all a dream. This is the true reality. So it is like this. Brahman, from Brahman, the creation manifested into itself. That Brahman, that Parabrahman, that singular entity, that singular existence. Even what appears as multitude, what appears as the unending infinite universe is one singular entity, Brahman, the Parabrahman. knowledge of this Parabrahman, realizational knowledge, experiential knowledge, knowing and experiencing it for what it truly is Brahma Gyan. So how do we actually know that Parabrahman is the one that manifested as all of these? It is there in all the scriptures over and over, again and again, in the Puranas, in the Vedas, in the Upanishads, in the Bhagavad Gita. I'll quote one example here. The example is from Vamana Avatara of Vishnu, where the small Vamana grows into a universe enveloping Trivikrama and measures all the creation with his feet, under his feet, making Bali surrender to him. I always had a doubt. Bali was very magnanimous and donated all his wealth, all his kingdom, everything to Vamana, and now Vamana is punishing him. Why is it so? The answer was there in the conversation between Vamana as Vishnu and Bali's wife actually. So Vishnu says, "Who are you to feel pride that you are giving away? I am the giver. I am the taker. I am that which is being given. I give through you. I take through the taker. I am everything. I am everything. There exists nothing that is not me. So this pride is your downfall, Bali." So we can gauge that there was never a second and there will never be a second. We can gauge this from another logic. If we take the eternal Parabrahman and the creation that manifested out of it, if we take that the first is the Parabrahman, is God, is the singular entity, is the infinite existence, whatever, and the second, the creation, the individual elements, we, the earth, the planets, the stars as the second, then if the second exists, the omnipresence of the first is not valid, because however big the first is, from the point where the second starts, the boundaries of the first are over, and there are no boundaries of the first one. Every philosophy of Sanatana Dharma, you take Advaita, Visishtadvaita, Dvaita, or any other teachings of Sanatana Dharma, or any religion, it says God is omnipresent. If God is omnipresent, there can never be a second. There can only be one, and that one is God. That singular entity, the Parabrahman, manifests as creation into itself. There is no second. There is only one. There will always be one, and there will never be a second apart from the one. So how did this happen? How did the singular entity manifest as multiplicity? We will get back to our car analogy. If you see a car, there are many layers and layers, linings and linings over it. There is a metal body, there is a engine parts, there is a plastic sheet, there is a fiber, there is a glass, there are different layers that finally give the appearance of a car, a full drivable, usable car. So similarly, for our human body, there are so many layers of existence. We don't see all these layers, but they are there. They are described as Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha, and Anandamaya Kosha. Kosha can be literally translated as to say container. The container. It is like a box within a box within a box. So we will see in this figure, it is depicted, Annamaya Kosha is depicted on the top. The smaller one is Pranamaya Kosha, still smaller is Manomaya Kosha, and so on. This actually represents the subtlety of the Kosha. In reality, the Annamaya Kosha is the smallest one, Pranamaya Kosha is more powerful, more deeper. Manomaya Kosha is still more powerful, still more larger. Vijnanamaya Kosha is still more. So this figure can be reversed actually. If we take the subtlety, then this figure holds good. So we will see what these layers are. Annamaya Kosha is the material existence. Our body broken into different organs, different tissues, and if you go break it till smaller, It becomes every cell has a nucleus, every nucleus has a chromosome, every chromosome has a DNA structure and all this. You break the human body into minutest parts, everything is Annamaya Kosha. The next one is Pranamaya Kosha. Pranamaya Kosha is the breath we breathe, the inhalation and expiration. So whatever our science, advanced medical science is known, we know more and more about Annamaya Kosha. About Pranamaya Kosha, definitely we know a little, not in complete detail, but as we know major percentage of Pranamaya Kosha, how the breath is taken in, how the breath is pushed out, how it manifests as the energy into different cells, how it is transported, how any differences in breathing affect the organ system and cause so many diseases. Then we go deeper into Manomaya Kosha. Manomaya Kosha is still an enigma to medical science. We know so much about Manomaya Kosha, that's what we think, but the psychological or psychiatric knowledge of Manomaya Kosha is very basic level. Then next coming to Vijnanamaya Kosha and Anandamaya Kosha. Science doesn't know these koshas exist, but actually they exist. And any changes in the Vijnanamaya Anandamaya Kosha, the memories that are implanted in the Vijnanamaya Anandamaya Kosha, the vasanas, all affect our behavior, all have their own physiology and pathology, affect our behavior and can cause alterations in the behavior of cells, alterations in the behavior of our mind. So the individual entity, the Atman, gets cloaked. Cloak means gets covered by different layers of Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha and all these koshas and manifests as a human body. This is about human body. Then what about the creation, the elements of creation? All the elements of creation are made of Panchabhutas, Akasha, Vayu, Agni, water and Prithvi. So it is Akasha is space. Akasha is not sky, Akasha is space. Avakashavat iti Akashaha. So that which gives space, that which gives a possibility of occupation is Akasha. The other is Vayu, air, Agni is fire, Apa is water and Prithvi is earth. So these are the Panchabhutas, the 5 elements. The permutations and combinations of these elements make all the elements of the creation. These 5 elements have their subtle components also. The Sukshma, Jala Tattva, Akash Tattva, Vayu Tattva and all this. The different permutations and combinations between these subtle entities and their macro forms give rise to the whole creation, all entities of the creation and everything in the world, including us, including our emotions, including our thought processes, including interactions between different elements of creation. What all happens is interactions, permutations and combinations of these Panchabhutas and their subtle elements. So ultimately it is Brahman, that singular entity that manifests as the creation, that manifests as all the elements of creation, the living, non-living entities. Everything, every single thing has come from that singular existence. Knowing this experientially, knowing this, realizing this and actually visualizing this in all elements of creation is Brahma Gyan. The creation that manifested as a permutation and combinations of all these Panchabhutas is in reality or an illusion? It is definitely an illusion because the original was not altered. The original remains unperturbed, undisturbed. How can it remain unperturbed or undisturbed if this creation is a reality? So this is all an illusion, a maya which cloaks the reality and gives an appearance of a creation, that which happens within the Parabrahman, within the manas of the Parabrahman, within the thought process of the Parabrahman, within the emotions of the Parabrahman. It all happens like a dream in our reality. Only when we come out of the dream, we can see the reality. This analogy of a dream is actually not a perfect analogy, but out of want of a perfect analogy, let us limit ourselves to this analogy, because that Parabrahman cannot be described by any analogy. It has to be self-realized, it has to be known by self. Then this discussion is all about the existence of that Parabrahman, the singular existence of that Parabrahman, the reality of the creation. Because only when we know that there exists something that is actually true and what we think of true is actually an illusion, then only a search will start, and if not today, then someday we will realize what exactly is the truth. So, how can we identify ourselves with that singular entity, that singular Parabrahman? That Parabrahman resides in every one of us, every single part of the creation, every single element of the creation resonates with the existence of the Supreme Being. It is we who have to realize the existence of the Supreme Being within us as our Atman. So, what is this Atman? That element of the Parabrahman that exists within us, how is it? How do we know what is it? So, we'll take an analogy for that. How do you describe an egg to someone who doesn't know what it is? We describe its shape, it is oval, it is white in color like milk, the central part is yellow, and all these things. So, from the known to the unknown. So, if Parabrahman is unknown, let us know about Atman, that singular existence that radiates, that resonates within all of us, that exists within all of us, glowing in unparalleled brilliance. That Atman exists in our own body. It is described as 1 millionth part of the tip of a rice grain. It is an ellipse. How can we say it is an ellipse? This shape is the primordial shape of the universe. Our Earth is an ellipse. Our solar system is an ellipse. The individual orbits are all ellipses. Our galaxy, the Milky Way, is an ellipse. So, what exists in the whole of the universe exists within us. We are the microcosm, the universe is the macrocosm. What is this microcosm and microcosm? Let us take an analogy of an ocean, a wave of an ocean. The wave has come out of the ocean, it has a form, it has a shape, it sustains for some time and then it goes back, merges into the ocean. This wave, if we analyze the qualities of the wave, the properties of the wave, those are exactly the same as that of the ocean. The scale is different. The wave is very miniature, the ocean is vast and infinite. But the properties are the same. What you find in the wave, that you can find in the ocean. What you find in the ocean, that you can find in the wave. In the water, the same properties, the same molecules, the same. It is like this. At some airports and some places, the structure of the building and what all are displayed there are displayed as a miniature thing. This is in exact proportions of the original thing. How the steps are there, how the roof is there, what is the design, how the planes are there, what is the ratio between the planes and the building, and all these are exact. This is a microcosm, the actual thing is a macrocosm. Likewise, our universe is the macrocosm, our individual entity is the microcosm. So in the universe, the land mass or the rock mass is very small. The space is infinite. From Sun to Earth, we have only Mercury and Venus. We have nothing else. In this vast millions and millions of kilometers of distance of area, we have only two celestial bodies. So space occupies the bigger part and land occupies a very minute part. Similarly, in a human body, space occupies the maximum part and actual material occupies the very minute part. You may get a doubt, how is it possible? We are all flesh and bones, skin and blood. No, if we dissect further, deep and deep as we have discussed earlier, we can go to the nucleus and the electrons and the protons. The space is huge, the material is very small. Like the universe, the space is huge, material is small. The ratios are the same. This is the microcosm, the universe is the macrocosm. This is a miniature version of the eternal universe. So, that singular entity, that singular Parabrahman manifests as everything, everyone, and it continues to glow unperturbed, undisturbed in everyone as the element. So if we want to know about the Parabrahman, we need not search outside, we need to search within, because that Parabrahman which manifested is everything glows within everyone. That Parabrahman sustains this cycle of creation, sustenance and destruction. Everything is Parabrahman manifesting as creation. So how to reach Parabrahman, how to know Parabrahman? So when we decided to know about Parabrahman, our mind doesn't listen to us. It just roams around. If it wants a thing of beauty for the eye to look at the highly decorated images of Sri Krishna. Look at the glorious image of Sri Krishna. If the ears want to listen a good thing, give it the golden teachings of the great gods and the sages, the saints and the Maharshis. So whatever the sensual pleasures mind desires, give Parabrahman to it in the way it likes. Then one day everything will become Parabrahman. The mind sees Parabrahman in everything, and then you will get to know the Parabrahman within you, that manifestation of the singular entity within you yourself. Now we get a doubt. If everything is Parabrahman, everything that manifests as Parabrahman, how can someone say that God does not exist? There is nothing like Parabrahman or Brahman. That's why this argument sounds very silly to me, because having arisen from the Brahman in a voice blessed by the Brahman emanates a sound that too is Brahman, saying there exists no Brahman. How silly. Everything is Brahman, there exists nothing other than Brahman. The good, the bad, the believer, the non-believer, the child, the aged, the dead, the live, everything, all dualities cease to exist in presence of the glorious Parabrahman. So now we understand that there exists nothing other than Brahman and everything is Brahman. So after listening all this, after knowing all this, then what's the purpose of this? How do we apply this in our real life? How do we progress further in the path of spirituality towards realizing the eternal goal, the only goal, the singular goal? At the end of Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna tells everything to Arjuna, he gives every information, whatever Arjuna asks, dispels all his doubts, and finally says, Yadhechasi tadha kuru. That means, now after knowing all this, after knowing good, bad, after knowing what to be done, what is not to be done, it is your wish. Do as you wish. So he doesn't say, do as I said you to say, do as I asked you to say. No, he says, do as you wish. That is the difference between an ordinary teacher and a great teacher. The saints, the sages, the Mahatmas never proclaim, listen to me, hear me, follow my path, do what I say, do only what I say. No, never. He who says like that is never a guru. A guru always gives you the choice. He respects your intelligence, he respects your decision making abilities, he gives you the choice. Yadhechasi tadha kuru. Do as you wish. Krishna is the ideal guru. Now Arjuna, the ideal disciple, says, Karishye vachanam tava. I will do as you say. So as you said, Krishna, I will do. I will war, Arjuna says. So Arjuna is the ideal disciple who learns what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong, and decides to take the path of good, the path of morality, the path of duty, the path of dharma, the path of righteousness, the path of spirituality, the path advocated, advised, elaborated by Sri Krishna. But here there is a problem with Karishye Vachanam Tava. So Arjuna says, I will do what you say. Then maybe after circumstances change, maybe in future, he might say, oh, then in that circumstances what Krishna said was right, but now I don't think it applies anymore. So we will go another path, we will take another path, we will do something else. So I say, if I am in the place of Arjuna, after the whole of Bhagavad Gita, I would have said, Yadhechasi tadha kuru. Whatever you plan to do, you do. There exists no entity called me. I give up all my existence to you. My hands are yours, my legs are yours, my mind is yours, my speech is yours, my thought process is yours, everything is you, yours. That is Parabrahman, that is Brahmagyan. Everything is you. There exists no me, no I. So it means when you want to do something and you want to take something or when you lift something, your hand cannot say, I will not lift. Because you say you lift, your hand cannot say, I will not lift. There is no debate between you and your hand on what to do, what not to do. It is your hand, it will behave as you wish. Likewise, when you surrender yourself to the Supreme Being, give up yourself, your choice, your individual existence, the basic you to the Supreme Being, then there exists nothing but Him. That is the reality, and when you accept that reality, He manifests into you as Himself. Then there is no opposition, there is no failure. That's why I always say, I am an instrument in your hands, play your greatest music ever. Complete surrender to the Supreme Parabrahman. Complete surrender to the singular existence. When you surrender like this to the Supreme Being, that Supreme Being manifests through you. That Parabrahman manifests through you. And when that Parabrahman manifests to you, there is nothing that is impossible. There is nothing beyond your reach. There is nothing beyond your capacity. Because you become that Parabrahman that you truly are. You are nothing but the Brahman, the singular entity. You are that. That is you. Tattvam Asi. So finally concluding with the poem that started it all. Maharshaya Saptapurve Chatvaro Manavastadha Madbhava Manasa Jata Esham Loka Imah Prajah. Krishna Teja summarizes this in the following poem. From you have originated the universe's infinite. It's yours the thought from which manifested the creation. I am you and you are me is the realization liberating. Into you shall I be led, surrendering at thy holy feet. Surrender to the Supreme Parabrahman that shines within every one of you as the eternal glow, as unparalleled bliss, and you will realize it very soon. Sri Krishna Parabrahmane Namaha.